Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today I read is 2 Chronicles chapter 36, and we had just two verses, 22 and 23, which also was the exact same. Those two verses that end 2 Chronicles are the exact same two verses that begin the book of Ezra. So it's really interesting. Ezra chapter 1, and we read all the way from 1:1 to chapter 4, verse 5. Hope you're able to read ahead and understand what we're fixing to talk about. I think for me, the 2 Chronicles, the way it ends and the way Ezra begins, I just want to camp out there for a little bit because it was such a cool description of what God did. King Cyrus had taken over the kingdom, and Daniel is still there. Daniel, this is like the fourth king since Nebuchadnezzar that he has, maybe even more than that, but that he has been under. And each time he has been given significant influence over the kingdom. So over the span of almost 70 years, Daniel has been a prominent figure in the government of Babylon. So King Cyrus, growing up in this system, I just have this feeling and belief that he knew who Daniel was, and maybe at some point was even under Daniel's tutelage, his instruction, maybe getting some lessons on kingly duties and things like that. Of course, it may not have been. It may have just been a total God in his sovereignty reaching down, touching Cyrus, stirring his spirit, and telling Cyrus what to say. We don't know, but I just like the thought of Daniel having that much influence, because we see this later. And man, I'm going to give some things away, but it's just appropriate. Daniel has so much more influence than what he's given credit for in these few books. Because when we see the Magi who come from the east, when Christ is born, and they follow the star, and they know that it is a symbol from God, it is they follow the prophecy of the star to the newborn king. These Magi would have grown up in a system that Daniel created in Babylon. These were the men from the east. This is where they came from. And it was under that system that Daniel taught and had influence over, even up until Christ is born. And we see Daniel even in the gospel. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to think he had influence here on King Cyrus and what's going on and what's taking place in Babylon. But we see that he makes this decree, and he says the God of heaven He is the God of gods. He is the ultimate God. And he is the one who has allowed me, King Cyrus, to take over this kingdom. And they basically ruled everything. But he gives glory and credit to God for doing that. And he said, because God has done this, I want all the Jews and the Hebrews and the Israelites and whatever you want to call them, I want them to be released no matter what part of the country they're in. And he sends this message out to all the inhabited places that they have control over, authority over. He says, release them and let them go home, because God wants his temple rebuilt in Jerusalem. And so they're going to go back to Jerusalem. And so starts Ezra and Nehemiah, and we're going to get into both of those. But those two books are the Jews or the Hebrew people coming back to Jerusalem and trying to rebuild the wall and rebuild Jerusalem. And it goes to the fact that what God had told mankind in the beginning with Adam and Eve, and the same thing he's told us throughout history, is that he wants us to be image bearers. He wants us to go out and populate the earth with other image bearers and to carry out his dominion, his rule over the earth, so that everybody knows God and everybody follows God's rule, because it's his creation, his kingdom. Well, the Israelites go back, and we see here in the first part of Ezra, they have an opportunity. Their enemies come to them. Their enemies come to them, and they say, hey, let us help you build this temple, because we want to worship God too. Instead of taking advantage of that and letting them come in and be image bearers and populating the world with, sharing God with these people, they say, nope, you can't help us. We don't want you here. We don't want any part of you. And they send them out. And as we go through Ezra and Nehemiah, the Jews do come back and they do reestablish the kingdom, but they do not follow God's decrees. They do not carry out God's plan. They keep and continue to keep shutting people out and not allowing anybody in. The Jews become very prejudiced against anybody that's not a Jew. I mean, the meaning of the word Hebrew, or Hebrews, the meaning of the word Gentile basically means you're not a Hebrew. If you're not a Hebrew, you're a Gentile. That just means everybody else. You're all lumped together because you're not one of us. So we continue to see this. It's cool that God uses a Gentile in King Cyrus to put out this decree and glorify God. He glorifies God in the whole known earth. But then we see the Jews go back and they don't do it. So that was today's read. Tomorrow we're going to jump back into Daniel. Love Daniel. We're going to read 10, 11, and 12. So read ahead. Come back here tomorrow and let's see if we can get a law enforcement takeaway. Until then, be safe.